Today we are going to look at color and how color plays a role within the creation of objects and how that applies to art, metal, and jewelry. Here you can see the essential question is, how does color affect the creation of objects? In the bottom right hand side, you'll again see that link where you can actually take notes and follow along so that you remember the information for the quiz we have later. To start, we are going to think about the colors of the rainbow. Do you remember what those are? There's a saying, Roy G. Biv. As a reminder, the colors in order are red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Remember, color is how light reflects off a surface and interacts with our eyes. It affects all the things we discuss in class and around the world as well. To start, the color wheel is the best way to see color value. That would be the lightness and darkness we talked about in the elements and principles, but within color. For the color wheel, we will start with the primary colors. Those are the biggest circles you see on the color wheel you're looking at. The primary colors are what create all the other colors on the color wheel. The primaries are yellow, blue, and red. Then we move to the secondary colors, which are the medium circles that come from mixing the primaries together. Here we have orange, green, and purple. Yellow should absolutely be at the top of the color wheel because it's the lightest color on the color wheel. And I'll give you a little tip at the bottom of this slide as well, that another name for color is hue. You guys will see this referenced throughout the color theory unit. Also, the smallest circles between the primary and secondary colors are our tertiary or intermediate colors. This slide goes over the primary colors again in a little bit more depth. This goes a little bit more in depth over primary colors to show how printing profiles on computers are set up. The red, yellow, and blue we know as the primaries are known as magenta, yellow, and cyan when printing. Sometimes when you're printing, you'll see RGB, that's basic, which is red, green, blue, and you will also see CMYK in another printer profile. Okay, now something to think about on your own. It's not a pear deck, but think to yourself what the three primary colors are that we just went over. Those are yellow, blue, and red. Then we think about the secondary colors and what it takes to make those. So we have to do a little bit of math. The secondaries are made by mixing two primary colors. So red and yellow make orange, yellow and blue make green, and red and blue make violet. So those are our three secondaries. Now, looking at those tertiary or intermediate colors, what I want you to notice is that there is one tertiary color between each primary and secondary. There are 6 of them, and they were always listed with the primary color first. For example, if you look between red and violet, you will see red-violet. Again, it's called red-violet because red is the primary color and violet is the secondary. And then there's a reminder that the tertiary or intermediate colors are made by mixing a primary and a secondary. Okay, now we're going to go a little deeper looking at complementary colors. Complementary colors are directly across from each other on the color wheel and generally have high contrast against each other so that they complement each other in an artwork, making it so our eyes can see each object. So I'm looking at the color wheel that's on the screen right now and think, what are 3 sets of the complementary colors that you can see? If you look at the top of the wheel, we have yellow, which complements across the wheel to purple on the bottom. If you continue clockwise around the wheel, you have orange, which complement is blue, and then we have our holiday colors, which are red and green. Think back to what we were just looking at. What is the complement of yellow? It's purple. Moving on, we are now looking at analogous colors. We are just looking at different color bodies to teach you a little bit more about color so we can talk about it when we are all working on our projects. Analogous colors are next to each other on the color wheel. Okay, so we're looking at the color wheel on the screen. Can you list a set of 4 colors that are analogous to each other? For example, if I start with blue, I can move to blue-green, green, and yellow-green, which are all analogous to each other on the bottom left of the color wheel. Analogous colors are generally pretty low in contrast with each other, meaning it will be harder to see an area of emphasis in an analogous color scheme because there isn't much contrast between each color. Okay, looking at neutral colors, the neutral colors normally don't show up on the color wheel, but they include black, white, gray, and sometimes brown and beige. They are sometimes also called earth tones as well. So making and mixing brown. Brown can be created a variety of different ways. You can mix the primary colors together equally, as you guys can see in the center of this image, or you can use the complementary colors to obtain brown. So doing a red and green together makes a version of brown. Similarly, a yellow and purple make a brown. And lastly, a blue and orange would make a brown. Okay, so here's the review. What are the complementary colors again? Just think to yourself which colors are across from each other on the color wheel. Now we are moving on and we're going to look at shade, tint, and tone. A shade is when you add black to a color. For example, here black is added to red, which give us maroon. Notice that the name changed as well. An easy way to remember this is when you put on sunglasses. The point is to give you shade, relief from the sun to your eyes. To shade your eyes, you'd add that darker color. So when you add black, it makes the color darker. Okay, now we're going to look at tint. To create a tint, you add white to a color. Purple plus white gives you the lavender color you see on the screen. Again, notice the name changed when the color is added to the original color. So, now looking at tone. To create a tone, you add one color to the original color or add gray to that color. This also changes the intensity of the color, meaning how strong the color is. As you add colors to the primary colors, you are actually reducing the intensity of the original color. So let's look at this again visually. Looking at a tone, we are mixing two colors together. Here we started by mixing red with yellow to get orange. Then we put the orange with the white, which created peach, which then created a tone. Notice the peach is much less intense than the original red and yellow we started with. Another quick review session. What do you get when you mix black with a color? A shade, tint, or tone? That's right, it's a shade. Here is a tone created by adding one color to another. This example uses orange and blue. Different amounts of orange and blue mixed together can give you a range of different browns. You can see you can reduce orange's intensity by adding the complement of orange, which is blue. As each original color is lightened with white, that also lessens the intensity of both the original color and all the browns, which are the tones that were created when we look to the right. Now we are looking at mixing colors. More often than not, it's best to add a darker color to an existing lighter color. Always start with the lighter color. Here it was yellow and then small amounts of blue were added to get the green. If you start with blue, you'll waste a ton of yellow trying to get the green you want. Another thing to think about when using materials is opacity. Something that is opaque is a solid color, while something that is transparent is completely see-through. Translucency, however, is being able to see one color through another. When you look at mixing colors, you will have to experiment and try different combinations to see what looks pleasing together. This slide shows enamel, which are elements suspended in glass particles that will be melted in a kiln to create the color. Each enamel will react differently, as there are some that are transparent that you can see through, so one color shows through another while creating the translucency we just talked about. And some that are opaque, meaning that they're a solid color. The enamels are also affected by firing time as well. So if you make mistakes in the process, the colors will be different from what you see on the samples in the classroom. Patinas are another way to color metal with chemicals. You'll need to be very careful with patinas, making sure to read labels so that you know how to use them safely. As a review, what is the difference between opaque and transparent? Remember, opaque means a solid color and transparent means the color is see-through, so you can see one color through another, creating that translucency of mixed colors that we talked about. Now we are going to look at color schemes, taking color one step further so you can really level up your designs. A color scheme is an arrangement or combination of colors especially used for artwork and interior design, but it also helps create all objects. You can see on the right side of this slide that there are several color schemes you can choose from when making artwork. It's a good idea to plan what you're doing and test the things with a small amount of material or in a sketchbook so you can see what the final result might look like before you start working on the larger project. A monochromatic color scheme is one that is one color and all its tints and shades. Here you can see the person has used variations of purple to create the depth in this painting. Next, we have a primary color scheme, which, as you guessed it, uses the primaries red, yellow, and blue. When we talk about a cool color scheme, you need to think about what you know about warm and cool colors. Think of things in the natural world around you that are cool on a hot day. Water, grass, popsicles. I put an image on the right for you that uses those colors. You can see they use tints and shades of these colors to be able to see the whole composition, because if we remember before, analogous colors don't have a lot of contrast, which is what a cool color scheme consists of. So you have to use tints and shades to see all the objects. Then we'll look at a warm color scheme on the opposite end of the spectrum. The image on the left shows you those warm colors. Think of the colors that make up fire: reds, yellows, and oranges. If you look at the highlights on those peaches, you can see that there is a lot of yellow in there, giving them a really warm feeling. Okay, here's a triadic color scheme. While the primaries are also a triadic color scheme because they form a triangle on the color wheel, there are other examples of triads as well. If we look at this next slide, you can see that the person used a secondary triad of orange, green, and violet. Because the colors are farther apart on the color wheel, you can see each shape pretty well. There are other triads you could use as well. Remember to experiment as you design your work. You may find color combinations you never thought of before. An analogous color scheme is shown here next. Remember, we talked about how analogous colors are next to each other on the color wheel and don't have as much contrast to each other. This painting uses some orange, yellow, and green. That is why the painting looks very muted, because the colors used in this piece are right next to each other on the color wheel, giving this piece a very muted effect. Okay, here's a complementary color scheme. This is a vast difference from the color scheme just before. If you look at the actual colors popping out of the image to the right shows this complementary color scheme. Here we have an orange and a blue. This split complementary color scheme is using yellow, orange, blue, and purple to enhance the appearance of the objects in the table setting. The last color scheme I'll mention is polychromatic. Often I suggest very beginning students stay away from this as it gets really complicated and uses a lot of muddy colors. You can work up to it, but I would start with easier color schemes first so that you don't get frustrated. I'll bet you're wondering why we're doing this, right? The end goal is to be able to use color to tie artwork together. Depending on the class you are in, color may be one of the last steps of finishing your pieces. It's one of the first things people notice in artwork or jewelry. I really want you to notice the different finishes that are available in the classroom. There are different color choices in metal, in enamel, and in patina that can be used in jewelry. Sometimes students spend time designing work and don't think about how the different metals and color options we have available can affect the overall finish of their piece. Remember, creating a game plan and following through on that plan is a large part of your grade. You can always create sketches or models of what you plan to do and color them in. You'll have a higher rate of success if you do that. It's totally okay to change the plan as you work if you run into issues along the way, but I really want you to think about each design so you're happy with the end result.